If you are looking to buy a house or premises, it is advisable that you instruct a lawyer.
In this episode, we're going to examine the role of lawyers and the conveyancing process here.
The Okri Property Show, shedding light on property investments around the world. Brought to you by Menvo Homes Limited.
Welcome to the Okri Property Show. My name is Godwin Okri.
And I am Fiona Chirabu.
The Nigerian real estate market attracts many buyers from around the world because of the benefit and the growth of this real estate market.
Well, this is why it is very important for foreign and domestic buyers to understand the legal process of buying a home here.
But before we delve into any of that, let's turn to our Did You Know segment and hear from the gorgeous Yinka Nathan.
The Okri Property Show.
Hello. I'm sure you know that Nigeria has a written constitution. But did you know that there are only 8 chapters and 321 sections in the constitution? Did you also know that there are some laws in Nigeria which are observed in Nigeria but is not in the constitution? Now, an example of such law is the common law. Did you know that the common law, which originated from England, is also part of the Nigerian law? The common law is also recognized in approximately 80 other countries around the world. Some scholars attribute the formation of the English common law system to King Henry II. Did you know that under Nigerian law, it is only legal practitioners who are permitted to draft land or property agreement for a fee? Therefore, I can say it is unlawful for an unregulated person to charge for these services. Did you also know that the name given to the process of buying a house is called conveyancing? I'm sure a lot of people did not know that. And finally, did you know that there are 7 essential documents that you must know about before buying a house in Nigeria? I'll name them for you, and then you can thank me after this. First, the survey plan. Second, excision. Third, the gazette. The fourth, certificate of occupancy, which a lot of people call the C of O. Fifth is the deed of assignment. The 6th is the governor's consent. And finally, the 7th is the receipt. Well, that is all we have for you today. Until next time, we're still on top. Meet us at the top.
The Okri Property Show.
Welcome back. We are still on the topic of the legal process of buying a house in Nigeria.
There are so many people who feel that they do not need lawyers when buying their property. What do you think?
I think it's very, very dangerous. Like, how do you spend all that amount of money that is valuable to you? You're not just dashing it, you're not just throwing it away. And then you don't get legal assistance. I think it's actually you putting yourself, exposing yourself to unnecessary risks.
A lot of danger. I can't understand how even experienced investors could say that. Yes. And you put it so eloquently. How come? I love it.
Just because of course, I've fallen victim of a few things that I've sold. Didn't have to necessarily be a house, but very, very important things. Or I've tried to buy without getting legal assistance, and I've fallen a victim. So I know how much is necessary and very important, very vital.
Very, very vital. So maybe at this stage, let's hear from Mr. Ajayi Agoro. He is a lawyer, and he says one or two things as to whether or not a lawyer is required when buying a property. So let's hear from him. Let's hear what Mr. Agoro has to say.
The OK Property Show.
If a buyer wants to buy a house, take us through the stages and the process, before the buyer has to go through before securing the property.
The first thing I'll tell anybody that wants to purchase property is to engage a qualified solicitor. If you don't do that, you will run into problems along the line. In terms of purchasing, the first thing you need to do after you've engaged a solicitor, he will advise you to negotiate with the seller. Letters, which is called offer letters and acceptance letters, to be exchanged between both of you, where you come to a particular price. When I say both of you, I mean the seller's law solicitor and the buyer's solicitor. Once they've reached an agreed price, then you know that you have a potential transaction going. From there, searches are kicked. You start your searches. First and foremost, you do a land registry search to make sure that the property has no encumbrance. Encumbrance means no problem on the property. After you've done your land registry search, I will also advise that you do a litigation search. That registry has just opened by the Lagos State government, but you can still do a litigation search there and do more homework. And very importantly, which I missed out, actually the first thing really is to also do physical inspection. In fact, that's your first step. Sorry, I jumped. Physical inspection first and foremost. That helps you in terms of seeing the physical condition of the property, and if there's any notice, legal notices, any problem, anything, you would see it physically. So physical inspection first, then you do your land registry search, litigation search, and you're now on your way.
What is a litigation search?
Litigation search is basically to check whether there's any court case pending on that particular property. That really helps. Otherwise, you'll just be buying somebody else's case. You will not be buying property.
What are the essential documents does the buyer has to collect from the seller before?
The most important document that a buyer needs to collect is the original title document. It can come in different formations. It could be a C of O, it could be a registered title, but collect the original. Once you've paid the purchase price, collect the original title document from the seller, and then your lawyer will also prepare a deed of assignment, which is a transfer document between both of you, transferring the land to the buyer. There's also a land certificate form. It's called Form 1C that needs to be filled, and that is very important in the registration stage. There's also the seller's tax clearance. It's better to collect that upfront. Up-to-date tax clearance. It's also good to collect the survey plan upfront so that you don't have to go back and start looking for the seller for any other documents. From the top of my head, I think those are the main documents.
The OK Property Show.
Godwin, the lawyer has given us all the reasons as to why it is very, very important to have a lawyer when transacting when dealing with such transactions, especially when it comes to real estate.
He did. And apart from what he has said, I think I need to add an addendum to what he said. If you're buying a property, you've got to be mindful of the designated usage. Let me just explain for the point of view of the viewers. There's some property where it's a residential property and you can't trade in that property, even though you own it. So when you're buying a property, make sure that the usage of that property befits what you're buying. So that's something for the viewers.
I think that's very important. I think we should also tell the viewers that they should ensure that the seller is the rightful owner. A lot of people buy from people who they don't really know that they own these properties. You need to find out that this person owns this property. Like, ask for identification cards. ask for all that information that identifies the person with the property.
Absolutely.
And then there also, what is it in Nigeria where you have to go and find out if the person selling to your house actually owns the house?
Well, yes, I mean, you could also registration, you do a search and all of that, but we'll perhaps find out from the seller, from the lawyer, because we interviewed him at length and he had a lot to say, so we'll come back to that. But you made a very good point. You made a good point about identifying the seller. And you also made a good point about the way you identify the seller is getting an ID, a document, a government-related document, like a passport or driver's license, to identify who the seller is.
Actually, with also that, we need to remind them that there's a lot of people who have documents that are not really government given. So you still need to be careful. Like, take all the measures. That is why they need lawyers.
Exactly. I mean, those are compelling evidence that you do need a conveyancing lawyer to.
Lastly, before we go in to see the gentleman, Mr. Jaye, that you talked to, do you think we have youth, not youth, do you think we have people in Nigeria who do not know where to get the information, this kind of information?
Well, for information, yes, you're absolutely right. For information, that's why the Oak Creek Property Show is very relevant, because we bring to you what you need to know in real estate, not just buying properties below market value, knowing where to buy. We're also going to deal with legal issues. Those are pertinent points, and it's absolutely fundamental.
And that reminds me, actually, for any of your questions, whatever you want to ask, all these questions, you can always email us. You can send us an email to that email address that you're seeing down on the screen. But right about now, let's go and watch Mr. Jaye Agoro.
So let's find out from him.
The Oak Creek Property Show.
What's the survey plan?
The survey plan is a document prepared by a registered surveyor where a plan, the area of the property, will be properly described, and it would also meet the red copy in the surveyor general's office. So whatever is in his hands will be exactly the same as what is in the surveyor general's office, so that you know you have an original survey with you.
Can you please tell us what is the process like?
The process for
this, the survey plan. And
you see, the survey plan issue is just an additional document. It was one of the documents that what the survey plan does, it actually describes what you're buying. So in your deed, you attach a survey plan to say, I am buying this property with this size. So it will match what is on the survey. So the survey is actually a very important document that goes with your deed.
What is the registration process? How long does it take?
The registration process is actually, unfortunately, very long. It's a very long-winded process, but it's something you have to do. Registration comes in different formats. You have direct application for certificate of occupancy, or you have application for governance consents. Depends on where the area is. You can either go direct for C of O or consent for the property. If it's a property that is earlier registered, you go for what is called governance consent. If it's a new area, when I mean new area that has not been built before, hasn't been sold before, it's coming from customary land, then you can obtain certificate of occupancy.
What's the customary land?
Customary land is land whereby the seller's forefathers had owned way back in the maybe 1910, 1850. They'd owned that from time, and it had passed from one family head to another family head all the way. It's mainly historical land. By long possession, they've owned it for being there for so long. So that kind of land, we're not usually registered at the land registry. But since 1978, all those properties now, if you want to register that, now you need government's consent to register those kind of properties.
We would like to know what the Land Use Act is.
That is a big question, and that will need a separate interview completely. But for the purpose of sale of property, what the purpose of the Land Use Act is to streamline property ownership in a particular state, whereby all land in that particular state is vested in the governor. That helps in terms of running everything through a very narrow path, So basically, just like the earlier questions, if you want to register, you go to the governor for governor's consent. If you want to sell, you go to the governor for governor's consent. The advantage of governor's consent is that it becomes registered land, and you take priority if there's a dispute over somebody else that did not register their land. So it's very important you register.
What are the problems caused by the Act?
The acts, like every different legislation, they have their advantages and disadvantages. Before we go to the problem, I think the most important part of the act is what I said earlier, is streamlined property transactions. But the main challenge, there are many, but the main challenge I find is it creates some kind of double taxation. A lot of properties and landed properties in Ikoyi, for example, are federal property. It comes under federal certificate of occupancy. So you have to go through a long procedure of obtaining federal COO, and then Lagos State will now come and meet you for their own COO, i.e. ratification. So you're going to be paying twice, and I don't think it's fair and equitable for someone that wants to buy one piece of property to pay different governments' taxation.
We would like to know what the solutions are. How can we, rectify the Land Use Act?
Well, the solution is massive. I think the last time I checked, there's a bill for amendment at the National Assembly. That's the main solution, is to amend the naughty areas. For example, the administration of it itself needs to be, there needs to be less bottleneck. What we find is that unnecessary time being spent at the land registry, legal hours, man hours, simply to register one transaction, it takes too long. So there have been many proposals to reduce the time in which these applications are done. And for me, it's that double taxation. I think a clause should go in there to even eradicate the issue of paying twice. I think once you've paid the federal government, then the Lagos state government or the state government should not charge you a second time, just like we do in withholding taxes. If I pay withholding tax in Abuja, I don't have to pay withholding tax again in Lagos. So,
thank you, sir. I've learned a lot, and I know our viewers too also. They've learned so much. I am still your girl, Anita Diva. Thank you so much, sir, for coming on our show.
thank you, Diva. It's a pleasure.
The OK Property Show.
I had the point made by Mr. Jaya Agoro, but I think I need to add a bit more about searches. You remember we spoke earlier about searches, and I thought let's wait for Mr. Agoro. Well, my view is this. For the point of view of the viewers, a search is where a lawyer finds out the true ownership of a land. So they go to the land registry and they check the name of the owner as against government documentation. Those are known as land registration search. The other kind of searches you could do about the property, searches about boundary search as to the diameters of the land and all of that. But the key search is a land registration search, and that's very important for the viewers to know.
Well, that is very, very interesting. And I also want to remind you that I said it before, if you have any questions, see, I don't want you people to fall into trouble. I don't want you to fall victims of fraudsters, of people who are heartless. They're going to take those millions of money that you've been saving for. Everything they have, they are sacrificing. I don't want you for your money. And
you're having a mortgage, you're getting a mortgage.
You're getting a mortgage. That's
those are expensive. So I agree with you. You're getting a mortgage and all the rest.
Definitely. So that's why I'm reminding you that kindly send us an email address. Kindly send us an email to the email address that is right there on the scroll. That is moving. It's not moving so you can go. It's moving so you can see.
Absolutely. Well, at this stage, we need a well-deserved break, don't we? And of course, when we come back, we're going to speak to people in the streets, and we're just going to find out what they say. I want to know what the people in the streets of Lagos and every part of Nigeria, what they say about whether they actually need a lawyer to buy the most expensive asset they could be involved in. Let's take a break.
The OK Property Show. The OK Property Show. The OK Property Show.
Welcome back. You are still watching the Okwe Property Show. We call it Tops. I'm Fiona and Godwin. Well, before we went for the break, we were discussing the role of lawyers in property buying business. But before we went for the break, Godwin had promised that when we come back, we're going to be seeing what people say to this truth. Do they like the idea of having lawyers or not? Find out.
Would you go to if you want to buy a house? Which professional would you see if you want to buy a property of your own?
Well, first of all, I consult my lawyer.
Okay.
Then
So why would you consult your lawyer?
for the proper legal documents and for the lawyer to be able to find out if the property is genuine and if it is legitimately registered.
And which professional would you go to if you want to get a property of your own?
I'll go to real estate consultants. Definitely my lawyer.
Okay, why your lawyer?
Because of course I know due diligence has to be taken in acquiring any property.
If you mean due diligence, will you please expand?
Okay, due diligence, I mean search reports, knowing the root title of the property I want to get and stuff like that.
Where you go?
Buy my own house. I will go and see the owner of the house first, Abi.
Okay.
After that one, I will see my lawyer before I will go there.
How will you see your lawyer?
Yeah, in case of necessity, because 409 people there for this country. If you go buy land where no being get them, after the owner will come tell you say I didn't get the place. You understand? So I have to go and get my lawyer and my witness before I buy the land.
Before you buy the
Yes.
that's which professional do you see?
Surveyor.
You said?
A surveyor, estate manager.
Okay. So if you've seen an estate manager, a surveyor, where else would you involve in getting that house?
I'll definitely my lawyer.
Okay, wow, that's good. Why would you involve your lawyer?
Well, because I mean things has to be done genuinely, and lawyers have a part to play in every area of our lives.
The Okwe Property Show.
You do need lawyers for your conveyancing process because you will not be able to understand the complexity of conveyancing. You know, how do you read the survey report? How do you read, if you're taking a mortgage, the condition of the mortgage? How do you do your own your land registry search? How do you know what kind of title has been sold to you? How do you know if the usage for which you're buying the property is what you're using it for? For example, if you want to carry out a trade in the property, can you imagine that? You want to carry out a trade in the property and you're buying a residential property. That's not fit for purpose. You want residential for residential and business for business.
Definitely, if you're spending like 30 million on a property, like you can't just be brave enough to let it go. You don't really have legal assistance.
So I think at this stage, well-deserved break, you would say, and then side attraction.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. I told you side attraction is actually very attractive. It's something you don't want to miss. I think for the ladies, for the men, people who love nice things that are actually attractive to your eyes. This is a segment for you on the top. Don't change it.
Just after the break.
The Okwe Property Show. The Okwe Property Show. The Okwe Property Show. The Okwe Property Show.
You could always check us on the social media platform, YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and all the social platforms.
Definitely, and I hope we have been able to inspire you today. Well, if we have, or any comments, just send us that email address. We're going to be waiting for it.
And this is the Okri Property Show. As always, I'm Godwin Okri.
And Fiona Chua.
Goodbye.
The Okri Property Show. The Okri Property Show.
Brought to you by Menvo Homes Limited.
The Okri Property Show.